Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello and welcome to our webinar. Hola y bienvenido a nuestro seminario de web. This event is being simultaneously translated into Spanish. Este evento está siendo transmitido en vivo en español. And to access that feature, click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. Para acceder a ese servicio, favor de oprimir el botón abajo de su pantalla y seleccionar el botón para español. We thank Claudia Mendoza, who is offering our audience live Spanish interpretation. Le damos las gracias a Claudia Mendoza, quien nos brinda la interpretación al español esta tarde. And I'm going to let Claudia take the interpretation from there. So we invite the audience to submit questions throughout the evening using the Q&A function available at the bottom of your screen. Please input your questions as you have them, and our panelists will either chat you an answer or will tackle them in the live Q&A segment at the end of this evening's webinar. So that you know, this webinar is being recorded in both English and Spanish, and both versions will be made available on demand on our website by next week. Before we dive into our content, we would love to hear from you about how you learned of this webinar. So Amity is going to pull up a poll for you to complete. Could you just share with us how you heard about us? This helps our nonprofit organization better market our free services to homeowners across Napa and Sonoma counties. Was it through our newsletter, our webpage, your city or county's website, or maybe their newsletter, their social media, our Facebook page, a Facebook ad, a Nextdoor ad? Let us know. This really helps us continue to reach growing audiences across Napa and Sonoma counties to help us resolve our community's housing crisis. Really appreciate you taking a moment to give us that feedback. In just a minute, we're going to dive into our content. I see more and more people joining us this evening. We had over 90 registrants for tonight, and we are so excited to see so many of you joining us this evening. And I think if we've had enough folks join us in that panel, we can move into our content. All right, so welcome again. My name is Renee Schomp. I'm the director of the nonprofit Napa Sonoma ADU Center, and I'm joined this evening by a lot of wonderful folks. I'm going to be introducing you to them throughout the evening. And to start, I want to say a special thank you to Amity, our admin support superwoman, who is taking care of all of the behind the scenes Zoom logistics for us tonight. Thank you always, Amity. Quick recap of our agenda. We're going to be covering this evening differences between site or stick-built construction or traditional construction, panelized, modular, and manufactured ADU construction. Then we're going to be talking about considerations when doing prefab ADU construction in particular. And then we're going to get to see some real-world examples from two really wonderful prefab ADU companies. So I'm really excited for that. Then we're going to have all of our panelists join us at the very end for a live Q&A with all of you. I also just want to let you know, if you're coming to one of our webinars for the very first time, we have webinars sometimes every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks, lots of webinars. They're all available on demand, recorded on our website in our webinar library. And if you're coming to us for the first time and you're wondering, I want the basics of ADUs, are you going to cover that? We're not doing ADUs 101. We've covered that in a past webinar, and we have a lot of great resources on basics of ADUs on our webpage, www.napasonomaadu.org. We also have webinars that cover all kinds of other ADU topics like financing, design. We have a deep dive webinar specifically on traditional site or stick-built construction. Tonight, we're just doing a deep dive into prefab ADU construction. So just wanted to let you know that that's our focus for this evening. And again, our webinar will be recorded. A quick intro to our nonprofit. Napa Sonoma ADU is a nonprofit organization. It's a fiscally sponsored project of Napa Valley Community Foundation with support from Community Foundation Sonoma County. Our sole goal as a nonprofit is to help homeowners across Napa and Sonoma counties build accessory dwelling units. We see ADUs as a key piece of the puzzle to resolving our very big housing crisis. And if you want to learn more about us and our funders, you can go to About Us at the bottom of our webpage. A little bit about our resources. We have tons of educational resources and tools on our website. I'm not going to do a deep dive into them this evening. If you go to our webpage to the upper right-hand corner to the resources tab and hover over it, you'll find all of these tools and resources in the dropdown. I encourage you to check them out. In addition to educational resources, we provide a lot of technical assistance and problem-solving support to homeowners throughout every stage of their ADU journey. So you can reach out to us anytime with any of your questions, and we are here to help you. That's what we do every day. In addition to that, we also do a deeper dive of free services for homeowners through our ADU feasibility consultations. My colleague who's going to be speaking with you later this evening, Scott Johnson, does these customized consults with homeowners. We talk through your personal ADU goals, your budget, your particular site, the constraints on your site, cost drivers for your project, all kinds of things. And after we have that deep dive with you, we do research on your parcel and we put together a 25-page customized ADU feasibility report for you that walks you through our recommendations, budget considerations, your next steps for your build, all the way from A to Z throughout the journey of the project, and our recommendation for the types of ADU professionals that can help you with your project. To that end, we also have a vendor registry on our website that you can check out if you want some referrals to various vendors. If you're a vendor and you want to be added to it, just let me know. It's simply a library of resources for homeowners to help them get going on their projects. All right, with that, we are going to talk a little bit as we start out about different types of prefab and also distinguishing prefab from traditional construction. The way that you build your ADU, the type of construction can have a really big impact on your return on investment, and it can have a big impact on the timeline for your project. So to that end, we get a lot of questions from homeowners who want to know, should I build traditional site-built or stick-built construction like I normally would imagine a construction project would go with builders on my property, building from the ground up, or should I consider prefab construction? So our answer is it really depends on what is best for you, your goals, and the type of ADU that you want. And so this evening, we're going to do a deep dive into prefab. But like I mentioned, if you're interested in traditional site built, we have tons of resources on that on our webpage as well. So we're going to go over site built construction just briefly at the beginning so that you understand how it's distinguished from prefab, what we'll be talking about for the rest of the evening. So known as site built, built on site at your parcel, at your house, on your property, or stick built construction. This is going to be construction that is regulated and inspected by your local planning and building agencies. This is the traditional form of construction, the most common way to build a home or an ADU. It's also the most customizable way of building, since you're going to work like you traditionally would with a designer or architect to draw up the plans for your custom ADU, and then work with a general contractor, builders, and subcontractors to work from the ground up on your site to build it just as you want it. It also has more room for unexpected variables to arise over the course of construction. That construction process is going to take longer because it's starting from nuts and bolts of working on, grading your site, laying a foundation, putting together that whole little house of on your property. And so there's going to be a building crew there, possibly for 1 to 2 years, depending on how that process goes and when you get started and whether or not things come up like COVID or supply chain issues. So those are some key variables to keep in mind with site or stick-built construction. And again, we are very, very available to help you think through, and we have some wonderful stick-built construction vendors available on our vendor registry if that is the direction that you choose. I also want to then go over some brief definitions on what we're going to talk about for the remainder of our evening, and that is prefab ADUs, prefab construction. Prefab can mean 3 things. It can mean panelized construction, it can mean modular construction, or it can mean manufactured construction. So let me break down what I'm talking about in brief when I talk about those three different types that fall under the umbrella of prefabricated accessory dwelling units. Number one, panelized constructions. So these are homes that are constructed from two-dimensional pre-built sections that are assembled on site on your property. With this option, the framing package is being built in a factory and shipped to your home, and then that is put together on site. Inspection, just like with a traditional construction project, is done by your local planning and building departments and your local agencies. It's a cost-efficient way of constructing. It's fully customizable, similar to the stick-built construction. The framing can generally be set up in a couple of days on your property, so it's also faster, generally speaking, than a traditional construction project. And there aren't going to be some of the site constraints that might hinder the construction process, especially for other types of prefab like modular or manufactured, such as issues with being able to access where you want to put the ADU on your parcel because you need to get a large entire ADU unit that's fully assembled already through a back gate or something like that, or over the home with a crane. So power lines, foliage, other access issues won't come into play in the same way, generally speaking, with panelized construction. Now, to get a little more nitty-gritty, panelized construction can actually be broken down into a few different types as well, and it can mean a few different things. So panelized can mean just a framing package. It can mean framing plus sheathing and house wrap, by which I mean like a Tyvek waterproofing membrane that goes on under the siding. It can mean framing plus windows that are already installed and then they're put together on your site. And then there are also SIPs, also known as structurally insulated panels. SIPs forego traditional framing in favor of a prefabricated structural panel that can click together like Lincoln logs or Legos and be used for both floors or walls. So it's a lot like a gingerbread house is how my colleagues have described it to me. So that's a very brief overview on panelized construction, AKA one of the three types of construction that can fall under the prefab umbrella. Let's move on to modular ADUs, the second type of prefab under that prefab umbrella. So modular accessory dwelling units are fully constructed and finished boxes with cabinets, plumbing, and doors already installed that are hooked up on site on your parcel. So inspection for modular prefabs, and this is a key way that they're distinguished from other types of prefab. Inspection and certification is conducted at the state level and regulated by the state agency HCD. So that's a key distinguishing factor from modulars. Because they're modular and fully constructed and finished boxes, they are less customizable than traditional or panelized. With that said, you're going to be hearing this evening from the maker of the modular home you see on this slide, and they are going to talk about different customizing options that you can do for their units. You can choose your finishes, like your interior and external finishes, and this modular option can sometimes be cheaper than site-built construction. With that said, it really depends on the modular company you're working with. And we sometimes find that because of the cost of a crane or other things that are required for transportation of the unit, sometimes it can end up being similar to the cost of panelized or, sorry, the same as the cost of a site-built build. With that said, because it's going to be a much faster process, you also need to take into consideration that you're going to have your return on your investment most likely happening significantly sooner. So if you're building an ADU to be a rental unit, that's going to be habitable and something you can start renting perhaps as quickly as like a year and a half or more faster than a traditional stick-built construction. Again, I'm speaking in generalizations and every project is unique. When it comes to modular, I also just want to make sure to make a note that you should be wary of imposter companies. By which I just mean, make sure that you find a modular company that has experience in the state of California and, if possible, in your area as well. So you want to make sure that the company has already actually fully built and permitted and placed units, preferably multiple, instead of simply being at the theoretical stage of their company. So there have been a lot of really exciting startup prefab companies that have come out thanks to the January 2020 state laws that made it so much easier for folks to start building ADUs. And there's a lot of reasons why when a unit is being built in a factory, you want to make sure that those companies have actually built multiple at once, so they're not going to have a supply chain issue or an issue during the manufacturing process. You want to make sure they're not going to have any budget or financing issues on their side that would hold up the ability to produce your particular unit. You want to make sure that they're not going to get hung up at the local permitting stage. Because that's where we can see issues with various companies that might not have experience with your local agencies and your specific folks there that are working on getting your ADU built on the ground, like any subcontractors that they might need to work with. So that's just one thing that we know, and we'll talk more about later, and is the same for manufactured ADUs. You want to make sure that you have a company that has been doing this and knows what they are doing. And with that, I want to dive into a little bit about manufactured ADUs. And I also should pause and just say that later on, you'll be hearing not only from this wonderful modular company that's joining us, but also from a wonderful company that does both panelized and manufactured ADUs. So you're going to hear about the whole gamut this evening, which I'm really excited about. So manufactured ADUs are third type of ADU that fits under that prefab umbrella. They are similar to modular in that they're also a full unit that's built off-site in a factory. A big key difference is that it's regulated by federal building code, by HUD, as opposed to by HCD at the state level. Manufactured ADUs are often designed to be mobile, and generally speaking, they're one of the most affordable types of ADUs that you can build. Federal level building code is less stringent than state code, so that's a factor that plays into manufactured homes. With that said, even though they are regulated at the federal level by federal building code and HUD, they are inspected by state inspectors before they can be sold and installed in the state of California. When you purchase a manufactured ADU, make sure that you know whether you're purchasing it as either personal property or real property. And I am an attorney by trade, so I am going to do my best not to get into too much technicality here. I really just want to raise for you all that this is a question to ask. If you are going to be buying a manufactured ADU, it may need to go through a paperwork process to become real property if you purchase it as personal property initially. It can absolutely be converted at any time down the road, but it's easier to go through that conversion process on the front end. Specifically here in Napa and Sonoma counties, it's safest to convert it to real property to make sure that it's going to be a legal permitted ADU. And if you purchase a manufactured home, you want to work with a dealer or a company that's helping you understand the distinction between whether it's a personal or real property. And you just want to ensure that you have their full support on the front end to fully finalize that process if you need to make a conversion. So if you have more questions about that, Steve can answer them during the Q&A. And we're so excited to actually get out of this theoretical zone and start talking about some real world ADUs. Before we do that, I want to highlight two other key questions that we get from folks a lot when they're talking about prefabs. So first of all, a tiny home. So understandably, there's a lot of confusion on the part of homeowners regarding the distinction between tiny homes and ADUs. So first of all, I'll just start by saying an ADU is not a tiny home. A tiny home is not an ADU. And a tiny home, specifically in Napa and Sonoma counties, cannot be a legal residence. So what is the difference between an ADU and a tiny home? I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Number one, a tiny home is designed to be mobile and is usually on wheels. You can see a really lovely one here on this slide. And it also may not be built according to the requirements of your local building code, and it's not regulated by federal or state standards in the way that modular or manufactured ADUs are. Unlike a tiny home, an ADU must be installed on a permanent foundation, and that's a key distinction as well. So just want to make sure that folks know that, because sometimes people come to us and they've purchased a tiny home in another state and they want to have it installed here in Napa or Sonoma counties and be able to live in it as a legal permanent residence, and they can get into some issues with that. So other jurisdictions, I will say, in the state of California are allowing tiny homes as legal residences, but for our purposes here in Napa and Sonoma counties, they are not as of yet, and they are not ADUs. Another quick note on shipping container homes. So unlike tiny homes, a lot of container homes are built to be legal ADUs, but we get a lot of questions about these types of ADUs, so we want to dispel some common myths about them. Number one, the cost of storage containers has risen considerably, so they're not nearly as cheap as they used to be. And then also the process of actually converting a container into a legally habitable unit is more costly and challenging than a lot of folks realize. In short, this is because, for example, you have to cut them to install windows and doors, and you also have to fully repurpose the walls to ensure that they're fully insulated and structurally up to building code standards. With that said, there are some really gorgeous container homes out there that might just be the perfect fit for you. There's a photo of one such container home here on this slide. I just want to make sure that you ensure that they meet all legal requirements for an ADU in your jurisdiction up front. And just like with any other type of prefab ADU, ensure that you have a full understanding of the build process and the fully baked cost up front. Okay, I'm going to stop talking at all of you and turn it over to my colleagues here. I'm joined, as I mentioned, by a lot of lovely folks. We're going to start with Scott Johnson. Scott works as a consultant with Napa Sonoma ADU Center as our ADU expert. He does all of our ADU feasibility consultations, and he's also the founder of Pocket Housing LLC, a consulting firm that helps homeowners through the process of starting their ADU project from conception through permitting. He is a wonderful resource, and Amity's dropping a longer bio for him in the chat, as well as a longer bio for our next presenter who's going to be joining Scott, Lindsay Moon. So Lindsay is both a licensed mortgage broker and prefab builder. So she has a wonderful mix of expertise that she brings to the table. She's passionate about helping solve our housing issues and helping people attain home ownership and increasing their equity. So we are going to dive now into a conversation about 10 minutes or so of considerations to keep in mind when it comes to prefab ADUs. So thank you so much, Scott and Lindsay. I will hand it off to the two of you.
Thank you, Renee. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. And we're just going to talk about, again, some things to consider with prefab. I'm a big proponent in whatever shape or form you want to digest. So first off, it's greener. Modular and prefab are greener and faster and can be less expensive than traditional methods. If you can build modular and aren't restricted by access issues, it's certainly your best bet. Prefab is next. Products like structurally insulated panels, one of my personal favorites, are the next best thing to modular and are great for sites that do have access issues. Why are these methods greener? Many reasons, including much less of a waste stream, utilizing renewable resources, a better built product that's more energy efficient, and creating certainly better indoor air quality, just to name some of the big pluses. It's also less expensive. Homes of the future are going to be built much more in a factory. No one really wants to be out there swinging a hammer in the hot sun. And building in a factory with artificial intelligence can and will bring in younger generations into cool jobs. Further building homes and factories will help make construction less expensive. It's a more controlled environment. There are no weather delays. There are less transportation costs and time spent commuting. But being able to build faster also means less labor, and labor costs are so extremely high, especially when having to also factor in all the insurance that a builder needs to carry. Scott, you're on to the next consideration.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lindsay. You know, there are a lot of considerations when you're looking at prefab versus stick build, or even different types of prefab houses. And one to try and keep in mind is that it can be challenging to sort of compare apples to apples, depending on what selection of homes you're looking at. You need to try and figure out what your all-in versus your base cost is for whatever house you go forward with. And prefab homes can be sold a number of different ways, whether it's panelized or SIPs or modular or manufactured. And it's critical for you to do the research to figure out what you're getting. Some companies are selling a turnkey approach where essentially you hire them and you write them a big check and they do everything from permitting through total completion, utilities, foundation, site work, everything. And they manage the whole project. That's a very different cost structure than buying just the house from a company, and then you're responsible for hiring the general contractor to do the foundation and everything else. And so trying to compare those two in terms of cost and price and what you're getting can be a real challenge. It comes down to finding out who's responsible for what. And if you're looking at different modular companies or prefab companies, really having that conversation with the person that you're dealing with is exactly what are they going to do? Where does your responsibility come in? What do you need to make sure that you have ready for them? And it may be that you just need to have your checkbook ready for them. But understanding that different companies structure that in different ways. And so if you're looking at one company, you may be getting one price, and another company is another price. You may be actually being sold two very different things. A lot of construction is sort of price per square foot, and this has come over into the ADU world as well. It's not a great metric for ADUs, but it is sort of the common denominator that a lot of people talk about. It's even less of a good metric for modulars when the price per square foot could be based on the total finished project cost, including permitting and everything else, or just the house by itself. So again, it's sort of on the homeowner to really do your due diligence and do your research and figure out what you're getting. This plays out with the estimates of estimates versus true costs as well. A lot of prefab companies, if you go to their website, they'll say things like, from $199,000, and it's on you to figure out exactly what that from means, and from $199,000. That 199 is probably true under the very best of circumstances, but do you have a slope property? Do you have a lot of trees? Do you have some long utility run or site access issues? That's going to affect your true cost, your total project cost. And so, a good modular company, they don't want to get caught out on these costs either. And so particularly if it's a turnkey service, you should have a representative that's going to come and view your site or do research on your site and provide you with an estimate based on your project and your site. And that can help you figure out some of the costs better before you really sign on the dotted line. Modulars are great, prefabs are great. I've worked with both, and I think Lindsay's exactly right. There's a huge feature in this as a building technology. One of the things where I see that it can be challenging for modular or prefab is when we got site access. Site access is probably the biggest limitation to all the different types of prefab and modular homes. Getting the house in position on foundation on your property can involve some pretty spectacular feats of logistics and engineering. Modular units are typically either trucked and then craned in, and depending on trees and power lines and your neighbors' homes, it may be very hard to get a crane to put the house where it needs to go. So you may have the perfect modular house picked out. You may have the financing ready, but you need to be thinking about your site too and how that house is going to get from the street to where it's going on your property. Panelized products such as SIPs and others are less restrictive, and they can be moved with much smaller equipment, but access still counts for panelized areas. particularly if you're building on the second floor, like doing an ADU above a garage on a detached garage in the backyard, there still is equipment involved in moving those big wall panels around. So thinking about the whole project globally is important.
I should chime in, Scott, too,
Yeah.
though, that if you were doing a second story on an existing structure that's already stick frame, you probably wouldn't do panelized. And like for SIPs, it does tend to not have any site restriction issues. But one thing to remember is if you already have an existing structure and you're tying into the existing conditions, you probably want to stick with the same method of building.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. Thank you for that.
Sure.
And then another consideration is the longevity of the unit. Most prefab companies, most prefab homes, they're built with great materials, the same materials that you build with in traditional construction. But there are some companies that do cut corners, and it's hard to know when you're first starting out which are the good companies and which are the companies that are maybe not so good. And particularly with a modular home where it comes finished, if you don't have a background in building, it's hard to know what's underneath that sheetrock. So some of the guidelines, and they're not rules, they're guidelines, is look for a company with a proven track record. Have they completed a fair number of homes over a decent period of time? Have they completed homes in your area, over a span of several years at least? What's their guarantee like? Is it 1 year? Is it 10 years? What does it cover? All those things are, asking about the longevity and the durability of the homes should be a really easy question for them. They should have thought it through. They should have a good answer for you. And sometimes you can compare companies based on the answers they give you from one to another. And a big part of the longevity, of course, is the quality of the building materials used. And some ways that some modular companies can save on costs is they really sort of minimize the size and the thickness of the materials they use. And some use more traditional standard amounts. So things like thickness of the sheetrock, the types of siding that's used, the types and depth of insulation that gets used. That's in some ways where they can save additional costs over the efficiencies of a factory. So, as a homeowner, it can be hard to tell, is this house better than that house? And it's sort of looking for details, open the cupboards and look under the sink. Are they using standard plumbing fittings? Is it something that can be repaired in the future easily? Or are they using proprietary stuff? Because 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road, you want to have a house that you can bring a plumber in to repair a leak, or have an electrician work without having strange fittings or non-standard materials that have been used. Most of the companies are pretty good on this, but it's worth double checking when you're looking for a prefab or modular company. And then finally is you've got local agencies. And as Renee said pretty comprehensively in the beginning, modular and prefab and factory built kind of fall into three buckets. And there's the federally regulated and certified manufactured housing, the factory built or modular housing that's state certified, and then SIPs and panelized framing products that are locally certified. And so regardless of what method you go with, there are some local inspections that have to take place. They do the foundation inspection and the utilities hookups and any trenching that's needed. Anything that happens on site that's specific to your site, you will have local inspections. But by going with a modular or a factory built that is federally or state certified, you actually get to a lot of the other inspections, the inspections of the house itself, have already happened, and so you don't have the delay waiting for an inspector to show up. It can be put together faster, and that it's been well inspected in the factory as it's been built. But there is always going to be some local inspections for some of the project. These differences, whether panelized or factory built or modular, can have effects on your project timeline, and depending on which one you go with, you can have ease of customization can be different from panelized versus modular versus factory built. Ease of customization, the project timeline, the total costs involved, those are all slightly different. So it can be really hard to figure out what's going to be the best fit for you. And it does take research and time and talking to a lot of people and educating yourselves and, watching webinars like this one. One thing, if you are talking to a builder, and if they can't tell you who's inspecting their home, you need to find another builder. Unfortunately, this comes from a homeowner that I've spoken to recently. If someone just says, "Oh, I saw a ton of these in California," that's not an answer. They will know, because it's a very big part of the process. They should know if the state is inspecting it, or the feds are inspecting it, or if the local inspection does it. They should have a real clear answer for you about that. But yeah, so those are my considerations.
Nice. Good advice, Scott. And on to financing. There are several financing options available, and more lenders are coming online with products better suited for ADU construction. Financing options, do remain the same though in terms of the qualifying. So make sure that you're able to get the loan before going too far down the road with construction. I've also seen clients in this position as well, and it's not a fun place to be. You definitely want to be using companies that, are, as we talked about, established and have units already built. Lenders want to see this as well. They want to see that this isn't their first rodeo. And in addition, there's a much smaller market of funding resources specifically for things like manufactured ADUs, HUD certified, and a smaller appetite from lenders, either as chattel or real property. Chattel is defined as being permanently affixed to a steel chassis. Which manufactured it does tend to be. And to be frankly, a self-plug here, working with an independent mortgage broker like myself, we can help you identify lenders that will work for your specific scenario, because we do both in the box and out of the box financing. So you can ask the manufactured builder or whomever is creating your unit if they can point you towards lenders that have successfully financed their products before, like myself. And on to insurance considerations. It's really wise to consult your insurance agency on any building methodology you're considering just to ensure that they will cover it. Sorry, I have dogs. Make sure you add insurance coverage for the construction during the build, which is called course of construction insurance for any project you do. It is super wise to have. And be sure to check your contractor's insurances are also in good standing, as well as their license. Back to you, Renee.
That was so helpful, Scott and Lindsay. Thank you both so much. Wow, I really appreciate that breakdown. And I also want to just note that this is a lot of information. It's going to be recorded on our webpage, and the company Maxable just put out a detailed article on prefab ADUs that Amity just dropped in the chat there. So check that out as well. If you're watching this as a recorded webinar, it's linked to in the blog post along with this recording. So now we are going to get into some of the fun stuff. Not that that wasn't fun, Scott and Lindsay, the considerations are fun. The definitions on my part were perhaps a bit long-winded, but I'm so excited to share with you these beautiful panelized and modular ADUs that Annie and Steve, our next panelists, are going to walk through with you. Before I introduce them, I also want to share with you a little bit about an exciting new program that our nonprofit is going to be launching in partnership with jurisdictions across Napa and Sonoma counties in 2022, and that is a permit-ready ADU plans program. So our permit-ready ADU plans program, and Amity, you can go to the next slide, I think, if I replaced that slide in there. This program is going to, we hope, make it significantly easier for both the planning and building departments at your local jurisdiction and for homeowners to find both prefab and stick-built ADU designs and plans and get through that permit process. So we're going to be sharing a lot more when we officially announce this program next year. We're working collaboratively with a lot of jurisdictions across Napa and Sonoma counties on this program right now. Both of the companies that you're about to see are in this program with us, and we're really excited about it. So stay tuned. We are going to be working with jurisdictions to find out which jurisdictions are going to formally join the program. So there's a lot that remains to learn and a lot of good stuff when it comes to that program coming up in the new year. Let me introduce our next panelist. Annie is the Director of Cities at ADU, which is a Bay Area-based company that builds high-quality, no-compromise ADUs in California and Washington states. In her role, Annie manages long-term strategy and operations for ADU's city relationships, advises the executive team on public policy, provides expert technical assistance to public agencies on successful state law implementation, and manages ADU's response to complex building permit issues. As I mentioned before, this is key, right? Because you want to be able to work with a company that knows how to work with your local agencies on the ground. Even if they're approved, as in ADU's case, at the state level, you want to make sure that they're going to be able to work to get that permit through the permit process with your local jurisdiction as well. Prior to working at ADU, Annie worked in the state capitol as Senator Scott Wiener's policy lead on housing planning and transportation. And then we are joined also by Steve Vallejos. He has been in the construction industry for over 30 years. He brings a font of wisdom and knowledge. He's the founder and owner of Prefab ADU and Valley Home Development. He's been designing and building ADUs for 16 years using various prefab methods. And over that span of time, he's built over 300 accessory dwelling units. He's also played an active role in the ADU legislation since 2015 and was one of the 6 companies selected to be a part of UC Berkeley Turner Center's Housing Lab. Steve is going to bring so much helpful knowledge and information to all of us this evening, both in sharing his beautiful ADUs, which, as I mentioned, he does panelized and manufactured ADUs. And he also is going to be able to answer your questions about any of those types of ADUs and about the history as well, if you're interested, because he really has that deep history and knowledge of the sector in a really unique way. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Annie, to share about your beautiful ADUs.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Renee. I really appreciate the introduction and being included in this great webinar. And thanks to all the attendees and Scott and Lindsay as well. So as she mentioned, I'm the Director of Cities at ADU. And as you'll see in the next slide, ADU is basically a concierge all around ADU service. And so not only by providing units, but also providing the services that are included when it comes to permitting, site feasibility, doing the design, working with you on special customizations that you might need, and genuinely trying to create that world-class experience for the homeowner, backed by many, many decades of expertise on our team, to ensure that you get your ADU built reliably, quickly, affordably, and with a fair price. And like I said, with a great experience. Our different models, ADU actually has 3 different models that we sell and have sold many dozens of these each. We have a studio unit that's 340 square feet, and a 1-bedroom that is 500 square feet, and a 2-bedroom that is 610 square feet. One of the things that's relevant in California especially is that when you are building an ADU that's under 750 square feet, you actually get exceptions from a lot of different fees and other restrictions that they put, or cities can put, on larger units. And so we make sure that in our designs, they feel very spacious. They're wonderful places to be, feel, exist. They're beautifully designed, but they're small enough that you can really cut those costs of getting past a lot of the fees that cities often put on larger size ADUs. I've got a couple photos here of the interiors that I'd love to show you as well. The first one, like I said, a ADU studio. That couch actually pulls out into a bed, and we also offer a really neat modern Murphy bed option as well. This is a smaller unit, sometimes used for flex space, office space, as well as an ADU for living. Next one you'll see is the 1-bedroom, similar aesthetic as you'll see, but there is a separated bedroom and actually a pretty spacious bathroom as well included. And then the 2-bedroom, which you'll see next, is basically the 1-bedroom, but with a mirror image of the other bedroom on the opposite side. So those two are actually separated by the living space, which is nice both for noise as well as for privacy. We actually have, as you'll see in this next slide, a really neat showroom network, both in the Bay Area and Redwood City. We have a showroom that we just opened down in Los Angeles and also up in Seattle. And then also in Orange County, a unit that we built for a homeowner. They've actually turned their backyard unit into a showroom where you can actually go in, walk around and see the unit in the wild. We service Bay Area, Los Angeles, Seattle, and we just recently launched the Monterey and Santa Cruz area, San Diego, and yeah, and then we are operating in Napa and Sonoma as well, which is a part of that Bay Area geography. One thing that I think is really neat about modular construction that ADU does offer is that our units, as Renee mentioned before, are they are pre-certified by the state. And so the building permit process is much more straightforward and smooth than a site-built custom unit would be. However, ADU has the ability to offer homeowners dozens of different customizations based on their taste, based on their budget, that don't mess with that permitting process or code compliance in any way. This is just a little table of contents about all the different types of things from the lookbook that we share with potential customers. This is also available on our website with that link at the bottom if you'd like to dig in further and see all the different types of things that you can do, upgrading from our base model per your budget and preferences. Another thing that I think is neat about modular construction, and this is something similar to manufactured housing, though I'll speak, of course, about modular, is that the way that installation happens is really cool in terms of innovation and high quality delivery for these units. This is what I kind of like to think of as 21st century construction. We actually have the unit manufactured offsite in a warehouse in a factory. And then we can time essentially the supply chain and the transport of that unit such that it is delivered on site the day that all of the site work and utility connections are finished, which is done in less than 10 days. So you only really have a construction crew in your backyard for 10 days, pouring the foundation and getting those utility hookups ready. And then we schedule a delivery date. And it's this really, really cool time when turns into a block party. There's a giant crane, everything is ready there. And in a half day, you go from having a freshly poured construction in your or a foundation in your backyard to a unit flying over your neighborhood, getting clicked in, and a certificate of occupancy that promptly follows once those final inspections are done, as Scott had mentioned before. There are two additional programs that ADU offers that I think really distinguish both our company from a lot of our competitors, but also I think just create a framework for understanding the ways that modular creates a lot of opportunities that benefit homeowners, both on the cost side, as well as the quality side, as well as reliability. One of these is our standard plans program, which we launched with the city of San Jose, but now have in dozens of cities around California. And what this is we really take advantage of the fact that our units are pre-certified by the state. And then we also, on our own, develop a relationship with the cities where we're going to operate, such that we can get our foundations pre-approved, such that we can get anything else that is standard about that design pre-approved by the building department before we even have any individual projects that are coming through. And so by the time that my permitting manager submits for the homeowner the specific building permit for, 123 Main Street in Napa, at that point, the city, not necessarily Napa at this point yet, but whatever city we're operating in, can functionally do a very, very fast, expedited, reliable review because most of the work has already been done. And we get taken out of that really, really long-term queue that sometimes leaves homeowners or ADU builders waiting 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, pushing 8 weeks sometimes, depending on how backed up they are. Another program that we've launched in the last year that I think is really, really neat in terms of meeting homeowners where they're at, whether they're looking for a specifically custom designed unit that they're willing to potentially wait a little bit longer for, or for a homeowner that has a need or a preference to get that unit in the ground as quickly as possible. We now offer what we call a quick ship, which is similar to when you go to a car dealership and you can either get a car that's right off the lot and drive it home that day, or you can say, I want a Toyota with this kind of sunroof, with this kind of stereo, with this paint, etc. We offer both of those. And the quick ship units are the ones that are already on the lot with the normal combination of options and upgrades, various different price points that are popular for different customers. And we can actually deliver a unit in 30 days from permit to final install and be ready for that final inspection, compared to, as you'll see on this chart, in many other different cases, that can take 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months. Whereas with Quick Ship, we can do it in 30 days. And I think that that's a really neat representation and example of the opportunities that modular offers when it comes to meeting homeowners' different needs that traditional construction may not serve in every situation. In closing, I just wanted to sort of highlight, getting back to the theme of this webinar today, the value in prefab and modular construction. And I think a lot of that comes into time and also reliability. Permitting departments save time with modular, homeowners save time and waiting, and also disruption from on-site construction in their neighborhood. The builders save time, the contractors have that down to an art and can deliver really high quality work because they've practiced repetitively the exact same project. And the outcome is just more low impact quality housing units that get in the ground much faster and serve the really urgent needs and housing needs of individual households and individual communities. And so just in closing, here's a little bit of contact information from the company as well as our website. I'd love to hear from you all. My contact information was earlier in the presentation, but we are really, really looking forward to working with Napa Sonoma ADU Center, as well as many other folks around the Bay Area and around California, to make sure that when homeowners are in a position to build an ADU and kind of contribute to their little piece of either helping solve our housing crisis or doing those community strengthening, those things that strengthen our communities when it comes to providing housing, whether for family or for other renters, that we can be a really high integrity and reliable partner in that project. So thank you all again for including me today and giving me a little bit of your time to talk about ADU, and I will hand it off to Steve.
Oops, let me turn on my video here so you can see me. Thanks, Annie. Wow, that was great content, and you cover a lot of things, so it makes it easy for me. And I guess I'm kind of wrapping this up for everyone here, so I'll try and move quickly. So as I'm concerned, maybe people's attention spans are waning as we get late into the evening here. But my name is Steve Leos. I'm with Prefab ADU and Valley Home Development. As mentioned earlier, I've been in construction for a long time, but we actually are kind of the pioneers of the ADU industry. There were quite a few years, almost a decade, where there was no one else in this space but us, and we have been doing this with prefab ever since. So it's great to see other prefab entities come to the market now and get good traction with their products. I've been doing, as you hear, panelized and manufactured, but also do the modular throughout this time as well. Now we strictly do, on the prefab ADU side is our panel factory. So that's, we build panels, kits. Our typical ADU build is 90 days. We've built, some of these slides are a little different, between 250 and 300 as of last month. We've been involved with the ADU legislation, and now I spend a lot of my time helping cities focus on how they can improve their process. As a company, we have a few more ADUs in terms of standard plans. We've got 12 total, and they're broken into 4 different categories. Our micros are the tiny studio units that range from 150 to 250 square feet. They can go just about anywhere, including front yard locations. So that's something that is not typically seen or understood about potentially where ADUs can go, providing that the jurisdiction will allow them as long as they meet the setbacks and everything. The minis are our most popular brands. We do a lot of these sizes in the 250 to 400, under 400 range in cities like Berkeley, Oakland, and San Jose, due to smaller property sizes, as well as just the financial capabilities of some of our clients. The suites are more popular in the suburban neighborhoods, and our villas are great in the larger suburban areas and the rural properties. Our ADUs are built using a panelized kit method, which allows us to build just about anywhere, since we don't need wide or overhead access. Some of this was covered earlier by Scott in terms of feasibility. For us on the panelized side, we work on lots of properties in the Bay Area where we have as little as a 3-foot wide access to the rear yard, and we can do everything necessary. The panelized kits come in basically 2 options that you see here. On the left is our simple panelized kit with basically walls, roof rafters, truss, and sheathing. The one on the right is everything that's on the left, but we also include the rough electrical and plumbing installed into the kit. For us, our build process is rooted in a well-tested system that we've developed over 16 years of doing ADUs, using just about every prefab method. Prior to construction, we work with the clients to detail every finished material that's going to go into the product, and that's reflected in the actual build cost. And cost has come up a couple of times in this session, and I want to mention one thing that is very unique to prefab, and I'm sure Annie will attest to this as well, is that when you're comparing costs of ADU, it's very important not only to look at the front end estimates that you get from companies, but also try and look for validation out the back end of what actual costs customers paid for those ADUs. And what you'll find is that on the prefab side of the world, there is a much more higher probability that the front end cost estimates or contract are exactly what you're going to pay for the actual construction. And it's due to something actually very simple. It's what I just mentioned, is there's a process on the front end with prefab is to go through and hard pick the selections for everything going into the ADU and interior and exterior finishes, because the process is really designed about being expeditious. So and offsite building. So what that means is it's not a design as you build process. It's design then build, and so that is one way of really containing the cost. So again, I say it's very important not only to measure estimates upfront, but also check the validation of those estimates from previous customers of these organizations to find out exactly how much customers paid in comparison to the estimates or the actual contracts. Again, our typical build here is about 90 days. And this is just a quick run through. I'll save you the steps of running through and discussing each line item here, but it's pretty much this process every single time in terms of how it looks and how it's actually written into an overall contract for an overall delivery and build. One of the things that we're focusing on in this webinar is to talk about the build being broken down into 3 different options. And this is where we get into a little bit more creativity than a lot of the other prefab methods, as well as conventional methods, because we're offering the consumer some ways to explore additional savings. So on the top of the list here would be the full contractor build, which is essentially, it's kind of like what Scott was describing. It's the full turnkey solution. You work with a resource that's going to walk this thing through the permitting and all the way through the turnkey delivery process. So that's the full contractor build. The owner builder is essentially taking that general contractor role out, and the homeowner is acting as the project manager there, but also probably bringing in a lot of subcontractor trades to do tasks and kind of overseeing them. And then the DIY project is exactly what you see a lot of on TV now, is the do-it-yourself project, and that's where you can see savings up to 49% versus the conventional contractor bill. Oops. So for the purposes of explaining the DIY and the launch of the DIY, we're focusing on our smallest of our 4 plan sets, which is the micro series. And we have 3 plans to choose from 150 to 250 square feet. The idea here is to target the low and extremely low income and small build areas, also while focusing on the primary goal here, which is cost savings. So when we look at this, this slide here kind of explains, those 3 build options and how it looks for these 3 micro units. So I'll focus on the top unit here, the micro 150. This is our 150 square foot studio. It's a 12 by 12 and a half unit. It has a little 4-foot kitchenette and a full bathroom. There's a couch and Murphy bed conversion there. So it all kind of fits in the same space. There's enough room for a table and a TV. A full contractor build of this particular unit from foundation up, complete build, would be about $77,000. You would be looking at about a 20% savings if you took that on as the owner builder, and the GC is not involved, the general contractor is involved, but you're still hiring subcontractors for all the trades. And the DIY solution, where you're basically doing it all yourself, you'd see about a 45% savings there. Each of these products, there's the savings is going to vary a little bit, based on the product that we're looking at. So down at the micro 250, you're going to see the DIY savings up to about 49%. So what does that really mean? I thought I'd create this slide here to kind of explain those 3 categories and how that translates to the questions that usually arise and why people are considering ADUs. The fact that people are considering ADUs usually stems from the fact that market rate products out there for rent are expensive. And in this case, I did a little rent survey in Santa Rosa through 4 different websites to find out what is available as a studio under 500 square feet. And strangely enough, most of those rental websites only kick back maybe 2 to 5 things available, and they range from about $1,200 to $1,600 a month per rent. And what was interesting about that is a lot of the scenarios that I'm seeing across the Bay Area when we do this kind of a study, that we're not actually talking about a housing unit for rent as much as we're looking at it like a room for rent. So this is the reason why a lot of people are considering ADUs. But when you look at this this micro 250, the first column there, if we were at just under 106,000 for the build, if you rolled that into your first mortgage, it'd roughly be about a $405 a month added to the mortgage. So that's roughly 34% of the lower end of that market rate rent of $1,200. And if you go all the way over to the DIY side, it's only going to add about $207 to the mortgage, and you're at about 17% of the market rate rent, which in general you're looking at a savings up to about 83% compared to market rate. Or if you're looking for an income opportunity, that that obviously is, that gap is in your favor as well. The next slide is the very same scenario, but what we decided to do is use the Andy product, which is from our Suites series. It's a 600 square foot 1-bedroom ADU that's, for lack of better terms, it's an ADA compliant structure. So we have like a 5-foot radius for the wheelchair in the for turning radius for the wheelchair in the bathroom. We have plenty of mobility around the unit, a walk-in or rolling closet and room to roll on either side of the bed for access. This particular unit here, when I checked on market rate rents in the area, again in the Santa Rosa area, $1,800 to $2,500 a month. For the full build here, we're looking at about $228,000, but added to your first mortgage, we'd be looking at about $873. Or again, going all the way to the other end of the extreme, if you DIY'd this, you'd be looking at $122,000 for a build and roughly about $469 per month. And again, you're seeing about an 81% savings in the monthly cost compared to a market rate rent. So that's just kind of a quick understanding of who we are and what we do. We have a ton of stuff that I'd love to cover, but we got a very limited amount to go with here. But we're here to answer any questions, and of course, you can always reach out to us, and we'd be happy to help you understand whether one of these products is feasible for you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Annie and Steve. It was so wonderful to get to see these real world ADUs and to hear from both of you directly. It's really exciting to get these in front of our homeowners here in Napa and Sonoma counties. I just want to mention to all of you that we have a vendor registry. Both companies are on our vendor registry, as are a lot of other wonderful prefab, panelized, and traditional construction companies. So check out our vendor registry if you want to learn more, and reach out directly to Annie and Steve. They have so much more, as Steve mentioned, to share with you about their products. This is just a teaser to get some information in front of you and show you some images of their really wonderful products. So thank you again, Annie and Steve. Now we're going to transition into our live audience Q&A portion here in a moment. So now is the time, if you haven't yet, go ahead, start chatting your questions into the Q&A function that you see there at the bottom of your screen. And we're going to dive into a moderated discussion here in a moment. Before we do, I just want to make sure that all of you are aware of some of our upcoming webinars. I'm really excited about our November 16th webinar. You can register really easily on our website, also on our Facebook page. The link is there on the slide. November 16th, we're going to be joined with the chief building official and a plan check staff member from the city of Napa and a senior planner from the city of Santa Rosa. All three individuals are experts when it comes to ADU permit applications. And we have heard from homeowners, I am so confused, what entails, what does an ADU permit application entail? What are all the nuts and bolts that go into it? I'm getting questions when I submit my ADU permit application and comments from the city or county, and I'm so confused. This webinar is going to be an opportunity to walk you A through Z through the full ADU permit application process, and you're going to be able to ask questions directly of those staff from the cities about common issues or mistakes that they see come up in ADU permit applications. And it's a great segue, as well, as I mentioned, to our Permit Ready ADU Plans program that we'll be sharing more about if you stay tuned for upcoming webinars in 2022. All right, so with that, we have been talking at you quite a bit. We are going to go into our gallery view here and welcome all of your questions. So I see that we've been getting questions coming in. I'm going to invite our panelists to turn on their videos and join us again. And I'm pulling up our Q&A so we can get going here and start answering you all's wonderful questions that I've been watching. Okay. The question that everyone always wants to know, very understandably, how can I get a grant to pay for an ADU? So the first thing I'm going to say is very wonderful news. The state just came out with a new $25,000 grant to help you get kickstarted on the pre-development process of your ADU project. We just published a very detailed blog post on our website that goes into all the details for eligibility for that program. You might be surprised at whether or not you are income eligible. It's wider than you might think. If you live in the city of Napa, the city of Napa has an excellent junior unit initiative program where the city will actually cover with grants a large part of your cost for covering your ADU. And with that, I also want to ask Lindsay to just share a couple thoughts on the primary way that you see folks financing ADUs outside of grants as our financial expert.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly is very dependent on their specific scenario, but the easiest way to do it is a cash out refinance or doing a home equity line of credit. I will say that the CalHEFA $25,000 grant does come in arrears, so you are still self-funding, and you have to be started. You have to have construction begun in order to receive that grant back. So it may not help everybody, but it's a start. And
thank you for that very key point.
Of course. But yeah, there are, if you, we always try to qualify you or in a conventional way, but if things don't work for you conventionally, or you have a different kind of income, again, we can kind of look at more out of the box solutions. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. And I want to just point out that we have finance experts, including Lindsay, available on our vendor registry. And we are going to be—
I think Steve wanted to say something as well.
Yes, I'm actually going to go to Steve. And thank you, Lindsay.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to make sure, thank you. I want to make sure to also just mention that we are going to be sharing more information with all of you about a new loan product that Redwood Credit Union is coming out to help local homeowners with ADUs as well. And with that, Steve, please lay your wisdom on us.
Two things. We are expanding our 0% interest loan outside of San Jose that we were piloting to all jurisdictions. So that is 0% interest for 6 months on ADU construction. That's one thing I wanted to share. The other thing is that the questions have come back to me and other entities about what is the next task to work on for ADUs in the legislative body. And my conversations have been a little different with the group. I've said I'm not as interested in more regulation work as I am with funding, and we've opened up the topic about funding and moving more money into municipalities to be used as loans or grants with the hopes that they can be structured to help alleviate some of the I'll go into technical terms, the RENA requirements for low and extremely low income housing that these municipalities face. So I'm very excited to use that or work on that. I think it'll probably be at the start of next year.
Excellent. That's really interesting. Thank you, Steve, for sharing that. Okay, I want to go to Scott with a septic related question, very key for those of us here in Napa and Sonoma counties.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's probably not an answer that you're going to love. Really, the first step is talking to Sonoma County Well and Septic. And if you're in Napa County, that's going to be the Environmental Health Division at the county. That's really got to be your first stop because they're going to determine everything about what your next steps look like. And those are typically what you want to do is understand exactly what you're permitted for currently, and then figure out if you can if you could hook up to an existing system, if you have space on your permit to allow for that, or build a new septic system. And that will involve engineers and doing perk tests, and there are costs up front with that. There is also the ability to, depending on location, to do what's called a bedroom swap, where you essentially decommission a bedroom in the main house. So you have a 4-bedroom house in the country, you turn it legally into a 3-bedroom, and that 4th bedroom becomes a home office or something, and then that will free you up for a bedroom in an ADU. The eligibility for that, the process for that all goes back to going to Well and Septic. in Sonoma County or the Environmental Health Division in Napa County.
Thank you for that, Scott. I'm going to go to Annie with our next question. Annie, we have a question from Clayton about ADU plans programs, pre-approved plans programs. And since you talked about those, can you share with Clayton a little bit on that piece?
Yeah, of course. It's a great question, Clayton. I will say that there is a good amount of variability that these depend on the city. Each individual planning department or building department is going to establish this program on their own. One thing that's really unique about what the Napa Sonoma ADU Center is doing is actually that it is a multi-jurisdictional effort. I believe this is the first one in the state that I've seen that will be launching. In my experience with the standard plan programs that we have worked with, there are two most common ways that this happens. One is where the city is actually soliciting and commissioning architects to come up with ADU plans that they then pre-approve and are functionally available, like you mentioned, off the shelf, like a menu. You can walk into the building department and say, I would like to build option B in my backyard. And then it just comes off the shelf and you might have to pay $1,000 license fee, is usually what's common. The other model is when it actually originates with the company, and this is obviously what ADU has most frequently done. Is San Jose is a great example of this, where the standard plan program there just means that when we come in to get a building permit for one of our designs, we can do that in a 1-hour turnaround on a Zoom meeting. And so that's a standard plan that the customer still comes through us and doesn't come through the building department. But the review time for that standard plan, all of the work has already been done. And so it's mostly just a coordinating and project management meeting, though we're still spearheading it as a company as opposed to the homeowner going in on their own. So those are the two most common models, though I anticipate in this space that a lot of cities are going to be trying a lot of new different things. So that doesn't preclude the option for there to be different ways that this happens.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Annie. And as Annie mentioned, it really is going to be specific to the pre-approved or permit ready or standard ADU plans program, whatever it might be called in your jurisdiction. Napa Sonoma ADU permit ready ADU plans program, we're going to be sharing a lot more details about exactly what it looks like when we announce the details and launch the program in the new year. So definitely stay tuned. When it comes to what a pre-approved plans program is, very good to just note that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's cut and dried, you're in and out. It really depends on your particular project, on the particular plans, and on the particular jurisdiction. And there is more to it. So we will be talking a lot more if you stay tuned when we launch that program. I'm going to go to Scott on the property tax question in a minute. But first, I want to turn to Steve and ask Steve, would you be open to sharing a little bit about solar? There's a couple questions here about solar. Is it required on the main home? When is it required on the ADU? Can you share about that, please?
That's something that's a little messy because jurisdictions are kind of a little bit all over the place. Although we're seeing more cleanup and consistency start to happen now. Now that we've got a little bit of time under our belts with the cities and counties having some time to adapt to it. And generally speaking, like if you're doing a JADU, you're not required to do solar. Any new construction is what triggers a requirement for solar. If the unit is attached, we get into gray area. Some jurisdictions are going with the designation that because it's attached, it doesn't require solar because it's considered an expansion of the existing home. Other jurisdictions are requiring it. Then we get into the gray areas of what is a trigger that could allow you to be exempt, and what is the classification in each jurisdiction for validating that. In other words, we do a lot of ADUs in, let's say, Oakland and Berkeley, where there's a lot of tree coverage in the backyard, and it's just the solar is just not going to work. So there is no, we haven't seen any jurisdiction come forward and say, just because you can't fit it on the roof, you're going to have to put it on the roof of the ADU, you're going to have to put it somewhere else. So most of them have been comfortable with if the solar cannot fit on top of the ADU, either because of a constraint of shading, as well as the roof area surface may not allow for the solar, meaning that there's vent pipes and other restrictions in terms of the physical setback required around the edges of the side and the lower edge of the roof. You just get to too small of a footprint so that solar can't work. So in those situations, the jurisdictions that we've been working with, we haven't seen any of them come back and throw a hand up and say, well, we want you to put it somewhere else then. It either works on the ADU or it doesn't. But that being said, we also have clients like in Berkeley where it's physically not going to work on their ADU, but they want to add it anyway, and they're adding it on their primary residence. So you can opt for, even though it physically doesn't work on your ADU, you can put it in the yard somewhere, either on the ground or on a trellis or on top of the primary residence. So you as a homeowner have some choices to your physical options if you want to pursue it. But if the limitations are found through the design process with your vendors, then you are most likely in a position that the city will acknowledge that and accept that. I hope that's a good enough explanation.
Really appreciate it, Steve. Annie, did you want to chime in as well?
Yeah, I saw a question from Carol in the Q&A that I thought brought up a good point. This one was specific to ABODU, but in terms of the ADU requirement for solar, the ABODU 1-bedroom actually, because it was certified based on the 2016 building code, which was prior to this solar mandate going into effect, we actually are not required to do solar on our standard ABODU 1-bedroom unit, but we are required to do solar for the studio and 2-bedroom. That being said, if a family wants to put solar on that unit for sustainability reasons or for other preference reasons, we're fully able to, but that is another question that my experiences with ABODU, but also if you end up working with a different modular builder, particularly one that has been building for several years now, checking on that. When were your plans certified and were they required to have solar at the time of certification is an important distinction that we see in our everyday with sales and fulfillment at ABODU between those two separate units because they were established and certified at different times.
Thank you so much for that, Annie. That's really helpful. Okay, Scott, let's turn to you. We have some questions about the implications of ADUs for property taxes. And we have a very detailed blog post on the subject that I'm going to share in the chat, but I'm going to let Scott give a brief overview as well.
Yeah, thank you. So with property taxes, it's simple and it's not, in that the property tax, they don't reassess the whole property, they don't reassess the main house, they reassess based on the value of the construction for the ADU. And what exactly that means is going to depend kind of on your project. If you have, a couple of acres in the unincorporated county and you have to do a paved spur driveway to get to your ADU, that pavement and those improvements, those site improvements will be taxed with property tax, as well as the construction, the value of the construction of the house and foundation and all of that. But other things that could be considered as sort of upgrades to the main house, such as upgrading the main panel, we've been told that those kinds of upgrades to the main house won't be taxed because they are upgrades, they're not new additional capacity for living. So it is all based on the value of construction, and they don't reassess the whole property, they don't reassess the main house. So those tax rates stay as they are now.
Thanks for that, Scott. And again, folks, if you want more details, feel free to click on that link in the chat. Do any of you feel you could answer Margot's question that we're seeing here? Steve?
Yeah, a crawl space is not necessary for hookups. We've done ADUs both as a slab and a raised foundation, so you don't need a crawl space for access in the ADU, nor do you need it on the primary residence. Whatever the house has, if we're hooking to the existing services, there's usually a method to figure out how to connect to it.
Thank you so much for that, Steve. So we have an interesting, perhaps more philosophical or policy-oriented question. I don't know if Annie might have thoughts on this actually, or Scott. Why are these smaller units not allowed to be main homes on a property? And how about 2 or more ADUs rather than McMansions? Well, there's a lot of directions our conversation could go from that question. Maybe I'll hand it off to Annie and then anyone else that wants to chime in.
Yeah, Jacqueline, it's a really good question. It's a policy issue that's both a modern policy issue and a historic one. A lot of communities in California and really throughout America established zoning standards in like the 50s, the 60s, the 70s that have requirements on the minimum size of your home, the lot coverage on your home, limiting the density such that it can only be one structure. And in some cases, it can only be one enormous structure, like a 5,000 square foot home, which is when we talk about those McMansions and these different typologies. Personally, I 100% agree with you that that would be logical and great, though a lot of just the United States history around segregation and how that overlaps with land use and fair housing issues is something that we've not fully retrofitted all of our planning codes to move past. The next part of your question about why can't you put, 2 small homes instead of 1 large home? State ADU law only allows for 1 JADU and 1 ADU. So you could have 1 ADU in the existing property retrofitted from a garage or an attic or a previously low use space, and then 1 detached ADU. There are some communities in California that have locally passed ordinances that say, hey, we actually will allow you to have 2 detached units per lot or 3 detached units through ADU law, and it's a building on top of the state law, though that's something that comes from the initiative of local government and not from the state down. And so for folks of you who feel strongly about this issue, this is sort of one of those opportunities when you reach out to your city council, reach out to your planning department, letting them know there's support in the community for that, because it would have to come from a local ordinance. The state just sets the floor that says it's a minimum of 1 of each. And I know Steve was involved in developing some of those state laws and advising and advocating. So I don't know if you have any additional stuff to add, Steve, but I'm happy to hand it off to you.
Thank you. And we just have a couple more minutes, but Steve, please feel free to.
I'll go quickly on this. Yeah, that was a good explanation, Annie. I think what I'll tell everybody is you've got to stay tuned, because we're going to turn all this on its head as of January 1st. SB 9 was passed, and so SB 9 is legislation that is kind of, depends on who you're talking to. The fear mongers are saying that it's destroying the single family home neighborhood. I as a realist and looking at how legislation physically works, it's opening the door to take single family home lots and do more than a single unit and an ADU on it. It actually creates the ability to do a small subdivision on it. And so with this, the answer to that question is we will be seeing a lot more opportunity to get smaller units on properties, whether there's existing structures there or whether it's a vacant lot, because the opportunity to create more density that has been restricted for decades, the door has kind of now been opened, and that takes place effectively January 1st. For those of you who want to read it, you can look under Senate Bill SB 9. You can read it. It's a little complicated to read and understand those things if you don't know legislation. But anybody who is active in this space will be quickly working on how to serve the community.
Thank you so much for that, Steve. And Annie, thank you so much. Scott, do you have one final comment?
Cloverdale allows you to do 2 detached ADUs per parcel. They're one of the rare ones in California that's allowing that. So I just want to throw out a shout out to Cloverdale for allowing that for people to do, because they also generally have bigger parcels around Cloverdale as well. So anyway.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Amity, let's go back to our slides to wrap up our content for this evening. We managed to get to all of our questions this evening. So thank you so much to our wonderful panelists, and thank you so much to our wonderful audience for asking such excellent questions. We're thrilled to be here with so many of you this evening. Like I mentioned before, we are here to help you with any ADU questions. We are a neutral third party. We are a nonprofit organization. Our goal is to increase housing in Napa and Sonoma counties, and our goal is to help homeowners build their ADUs regardless of the type of build and regardless of your goals for building an ADU. So reach out to us. With that, I also want to thank our supporters, Napa Valley Community Foundation. We are a fiscally sponsored project of Napa Valley Community Foundation with support from Community Foundation Sonoma County. We also have support from the cities of Napa and Calistoga and the county of Napa and others. And most of all, I want to say thank you so much to all of you. We really appreciate your time. As soon as we close this webinar, an automatic pop-up window is going to come up in front of you to complete an anonymous survey to give us feedback on this webinar. Please give us feedback. We're constantly hearing from homeowners, and it helps us keep continuing to improve the free services that we provide to our community as an organization. If you have questions, though, don't ask them in the survey, reach out directly to me, and I will be here to help answer your questions. And Scott is here to help you do a personalized custom ADU feasibility consultation anytime as well. Thank you again so much to Annie and Steve for sharing about your beautiful products. Thank you so much to Lindsay and Scott for your wonderful expertise, Claudia for your interpretation, Amity for making sure everything is running, and may you all have a lovely evening. We hope to see you on November 16th to talk about how to put together an ADU permit application. You can register today on our website. Take care, everyone.